is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Watch the greenbacks tumble.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial's set correctly to USAPrepares.com. We're broadcasting 2 hours from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains, Studio A. And there's a link to all of your instructors on the website, USAPrepares.com. Podcasts are free on the website. Converging threats are confronted daily by your instructors. I'm Vincent Finelli. Nathan is engineering the broadcast from Minnesota at Genesis Communications Network. Today our class is focused on physics and the worst man-made disaster since Noah's flood, Fukushima. With me, Dr. Richard Allen Miller, the lead physicist for the U.S. Navy at the Pentagon, author, farmer, and lecturer. Welcome, Dr. Richard Allen Miller.
Good morning, Vincent. I love your laugh when you start each morning. I love it.
Well,
you come in good and you're laughing like you know you're going to do it to them.
well, you know, Rick, you know what it is? I can't believe I'm on the radio. I'm amused. I can't believe that that anybody would put me on the radio, and I just, I can't. It's amusing to me. But anyway, hey, Rick, I wanted to share a short story with you before we get started about Fukushima. Now, you've been to the expos, you've been to the meetups, you've done teleseminar meetups and in-person meetups, you've been to the farm, we've done stuff together, so you kind of know who I am. You've got your own room here at the farm. And so let me just set the stage for this. So you know that I'm a farmer class. We talk about farming. And one of the tools that a farmer has is a farm tractor. And we have several farm tractors here. And one of them is a compact John Deere Model 1070. It's a 40 horsepower tractor with a front end loader. It weighs about 3,000 pounds. It's great for picking up a bale of hay on the back, 1,000-pound bale of hay on the back and 1,000-pound bale of hay on the front, and carrying around and bringing them to the cow. So I use it all the time. It's the first tractor that I'll put the key in because it's so handy. Well, one of the front end loader hoses sprung a leak, a hydraulic leak. And so you don't want to use that having oil sprayed, from the hydraulic system onto the bale of hay. So I went to replace that hose. Now, John Deere really is proud of their hoses. That's an expression we have in Missouri. When someone overcharges... when someone overcharges you...
Listen to you.
So when someone overcharges you for an item, we say that they're really proud of it. And we don't say... Yeah, you can get hosed at the dealer. And so I decided to... So I took the hose off, and I was on my way to the meetup with Mrs. Finelli last Monday. And I had this little hose, and it's only about 18 inches long. So I got the oil out of it, drained the oil out of it, and put it in a paper bag, put it in the vehicle, and went into the auto parts store, the name you would know if you went to an auto parts store, large chain. And I showed it to the guy, waited in line, showed it to the guy. He said, let me go in the back. 5 minutes later, he came back, with my original hose, and he said, geez, I have one of the fittings for this hose, but I don't have the other end of it. So why don't you go down to this other independent parts dealer this jobber down the road, and he told me where it was. So I went in there, and that was an older building. You know, it wasn't as bright, and it wasn't as fancy and shiny and new. And the parts men said to me, just go through that door in the back. Go walk through the parts area. Go through the back there. Open that door, and ask for the machinist. So I went in and I said, hey, I'm here. And so the machinist came over and he said, oh, okay, so you got the hose blues? And I said, yeah. He said, all right, well, let me make one for you. Within 2 minutes, he had the hose cut, measured, cut, assembled, the fittings compressed on it. I mean, he did a fabulous, fabulous job. And while he was doing it, I was looking around, and he had machines to bore engines, to machine crankshafts, to hone cylinders, to boil engine blocks. I mean, they had millions of dollars.
Machine shop, yeah.
It was a real, yeah, and you wouldn't know it because from the front, what you'd see from the road, you had no idea that they actually had, the parts store was a little piece of the business compared to the machine shop. Anyway, I was so impressed. I couldn't believe it. So I was telling Mrs. Finelli, we got in the car. I thanked the guys. I said, wow, I'm really impressed. And I told them, when I was paying for it, I was really impressed at what they did and how fast and what great customer service. And I got in the car and I said, I said to Mrs. Finelli, I think people need to know about these guys. So I think I ought to talk about them on the air and, mention who they are and where they're located. So if they have a problem like I did, they can get absolutely great service with, the guy didn't have to fumble around for the parts. I mean, this John Deere is a 1991 tractor with metric parts. It's actually a Japanese tractor with green paint and some, different plastic on it so people wouldn't know it's a Japanese tractor. They think it's, made in the United States by John Deere, but it's not. Anyway, so I was impressed, and I called him. I asked Mrs. Finelli to dial a number, and I picked up the corded handset, and I called the parts guy, and I said, remember me? I was just there a couple minutes ago. I was so impressed with your customer service, with your attention to detail, with the accuracy of which you measured and made this part. It is absolutely perfect. I don't see that kind of attention to detail in many places. Would you mind if I talked about you on the air? He said, hold on. He came back and he said, I'd rather you didn't. I couldn't believe it. Rick, I couldn't believe that this company would say, please don't, talk about us on the air. So I'm not talking about them. I'm not going to mention their name. But what the rest of the story is, while I was paying for this, one of my farmer friends' neighbors happened to be at the same store, and he was a frequent flyer at this particular auto parts store. And everyone knows this other guy. And I guess when I left, they probably said, do you know who that was? That guy's crazy. He's on the air. He says all kinds of things. And I guess what I'm saying is the parts store was afraid of my reputation. Can you imagine that?
Well, your opinion is solid usually, and that's why people respect and listen to you. And you have something to say. And actually, I find you dead on most of your hair up your behind. Every time you have a problem, I have actually found you to be dead on. And so I'm impressed. That's why I do radio with you, and I'm proud to call you my friend.
Well, Rick, I wasn't asking for a compliment.
I know. No. It's just it took you years to get to that place of credibility. And it's just by doing it every day, walking the talk, so that there is this consistency of expectation on how you're going to respond to something.
Well, and I was just shocked that most people are anxious to get promotion, publicity,
and
marketing.
My father used to say all publicity is good publicity. There's no such thing as bad publicity, even if you were ranking on something. I had someone actually get a hold of General Electric on Fukushima, and I can share with you how it actually transpired. I'll send that email, which is quite enlightening. There's a young kid I've met called Ethan. What's his? He calls. He's a Smith. What is that special child? Indigo Smith. Ethan Indigo Smith. He's a whiz kid. He's a smart kid. He's like me when I was 35. And he picked up the phone and called General Electric about their nuclear power plant and asked them about what they were going to do with Fukushima. And the woman that answered didn't even know about Fukushima.
Wow.
It gets better.
Wow.
It gets much, much better. However, in their defense, and actually the secondary follow-up that General Electric did for this kid actually implied that the problem isn't so much with General Electric as it is the management systems that actually have access to these toys. You know, General Electric originally designed that reactor, that Daiichi plant form, as clean nuclear energy. It was supposed to use up all the plutonium rods. It was not supposed to. And really, it was not the design failure. It's the management of it that is the problem. And what happened exactly is TEPCO is a for-profit company. It's not part of the government. It's a for-profit. They have a bottom line, and they have investors, and they have to deal with that part of it. And what happened, that's why there's a movement to maybe move our energy back into government control. That's crazy. That's going to get worse. There's no way it could be better. But TEPCO is for profit, and because it was for profit, it becomes cost ineffectual to use up the spent plutonium rods. And so what they do is they put them in a pool over there, or later, who knows what's going to happen to them. I used to say there was no design left for our grandchildren. No, that's not true. Actually, the Daiichi-type plant was designed to be very efficient, down to home, using all the radioactivity up, so there were no debris. And because of profit margins, it was cheaper not to use it in that capacity. And so there was the first card in a house of cards ready to fall.
So, Rick, are you saying that General Electric built the plant properly and TEPCO changed the implementation so that it would not be used that way to make it safe for the future? Let's talk about that when we come back. Dr. Richard Alan Miller, richardallenmiller.com. Class, Dr. Richard Alan Miller's with us. Richard, A-L-A-N, Miller.com. The Real Fox Mulder of the X-Files. And we're talking about Fukushima. So, Rick, my question is, did General Electric design a nuclear reactor system to be built in Japan that was safe, with all the safeguards in place, so that we wouldn't have the catastrophe that we did have? And it was
yes. Basically,
really?
Physics-wise, the design of that plant is better than anything on Earth. It was designed to be functional and serviceable and clean. What happened was where it was located. That's a good place to start. Where they chose to locate the plant, where it had the possibility of a tsunami, was the second card. The third card was the coronal mass ejection from the sun. The fourth card, it goes on as a house of cards in terms of, while the event itself was not terribly threatening, what's happening now is, and there's no oversight, because TEPCO is a for-profit company, and like all for-profit companies, hires the local infrastructure of waste management, the Yakuza. And so here we are at 3 milliseconds to midnight with the possibility of the West Coast having to be evacuated in March. Now, it's basically the government was embarrassed. I have interviews with their, what is it? He's an emperor of Japan. They have emperors. The emperor being uptight at not being given full disclosure that TEPCO lied, that TEPCO held back, and it's like in the movies where you don't want to be accountable, so you don't. It's lying by omission. In other words, they didn't say falses. Well, yes, they did, but they didn't say falses as much as they did not disclose full disclosure. Now, the world is going to be affected by this, which means that every single person needs to be proactive in starting some kind of accountability. And who's managing this situation at this very moment? And that comes back to people like Lady Barbara Judge and some of these ringers that are so scary now that I have a deep concern, and I don't have a solution because General Electric didn't even know that it happened. Was brought in. They brought in a bunch of their material and warned people on what to do, disregarded, and now here we are with all 4 reactors have now melted down. None of this was necessary, even after the tsunami, which was the chink in that armor, I'll tell you that. When that tsunami came in and dropped them off, the first thing that should have happened is they should have capped it with boron and turned everything off. They didn't.
Yeah.
That's why there were explosions. And then TEPCO lied further because they wanted to get them back up online. Further, there was up north, they were trying to turn those on as well. Japan has now got a lockdown a little bit, I think, on that nonsense. But what's happened now as a result of the lying and cover-ups is the problem is expanding. And it has to stop immediately. And I don't have an idea how to do that. I'm involved with some Africans that just came into $160 million. I've had that confirmed with documents and all of that. They're like talking straight. They've asked me to be part of a board of questioning people on what they think they're doing. I probably am out of my league. My area of expertise is not in nuclear physics, although, what's there to know in terms of simple things. I've started a couple of blogs in different locations, including Facebook, where I will post updates of what I think is significant and important. I make certain that you get those. That's my diary each day.
Rick, hold that. Rick, I want to share a story with you. When I lived in Virginia, we had a computer manufacturing company. We did consulting in 5 counties in Virginia. And I got a call from a company that was a manufacturing company about 20 miles away. And this was a very interesting company, a unique company, and they manufactured carbon brushes. Now, carbon brushes are those, if you look inside electric motors class and you see sparks right around the armature, that's where the carbon brushes are. So these brushes are blocks of carbon mixed with some copper, and they're hard and small, and they usually have affixed to them a flexible stranded copper wire. And this company manufactured those brushes for Detroit, for the automotive industry, for use in alternators, for use in automobile starters, and for larger applications like large generators and motors. And they asked me to come in because they were having a problem with a lot of their computers, and they couldn't get them to stay running. So I went in there, and the first thing I noticed was the carpeting was black. And I've never seen all jet black carpeting in a building. Second thing I noticed was the molding in the front office, along with the carpeting, was black. So the trim was black. The walls were like a dark tan. The carpet was black. Everybody wore black shoes. And, it took maybe a second for me to figure this out. Hey, these guys manufacture carbon devices that are the same color as the carpeting, the trim, and everybody's shoes, black. Well, I went into the factory, into the manufacturing area, and there was carbon dust in the air. Now, the reason I'm telling you this story is the employees all wore black shoes. When they would change in their car, they would wear specific clothing that was dark and black because the carbon in the air would get on their clothing. They would wear black shoes, and they would change their shoes, take them out of a plastic bag from their vehicle, put them on, and then walk from the parking lot into work. And then when they were done with work, they would walk from the factory to their car in the parking lot, take their shoes off, put the shoes in a plastic bag, and then change their shoes to drive home. Now, the reason they did all this was because of all the carbon in the air. Now, the carbon in the air was causing problems with the small circuit traces on the computers, and it caused them to fail. Now, I saw this, and I said, this isn't going to work. With the standard cooling system on a computer, where the air is sucked in through the bottom of the computer and drawn through the circuitry and out the power supply out the back, it's going to cause the computer to fail in about a week. So we'll have to put a reverse flow the air cooling system on the computers. We'll have to put a filter on the fan and blow air into the computer. And that solved the problem. But what I'm saying is I looked at that and I said to the guys, hey, if you buy a computer from us, we're going to have the same problem. So I engineered a workaround for them, and it worked. The point I'm trying to make, Rick, it's a long way to say this, but General Electric could have said, whoa, wait a minute, hold it. You want to put a nuclear reactor on the coastline of Japan? Have you guys lost your mind?
You're right, of course. There is a whole series of accountabilities here. But the one that I'm about now, the one I primarily focus on, is TEPCO and who is oversighting their management of systems right now. It's really kind of scary. I didn't mean to go on a big diatribe either. I'm just getting more sensitive to what's really going on, and it's all about greed.
Yeah.
Actually, the nuclear industry and why we're nuclear power is not cheaper. It's actually more expensive than other kinds of things, including the tides of the ocean. It turns out it's cheaper. It's more expensive. The reason we're into it is because of weaponry. And the intentionality of going in this direction with technology, because we can also use that research toward weapons.
So Rick, I still place the blame at General Electric because I really believe
there is accountability there. But truthfully, even when they did recommendations, they were disregarded. The way they're doing their cleanup right now is a sham. They're saying right now, Dennis Kucinich in your region right now has a movement with a primary group of physicists out of Japan that are saying to turn nuclear energy off everywhere.
Yes. And I agree with him.
That is what has to happen. Not try to find blame. Let's get started with stopping this nonsense. And it's going to require every single person writing letters. I have no idea who to whom. I will upload that email to you so that you have some addresses and phone numbers, and maybe because you're smart, you know how to do this that I don't, in terms of getting a phone number, getting an address, whatever. That part is really important now, that everybody get involved in at least writing a simple, please, I'm a voter, please stop this nonsense now. That kind of a letter, nothing. You don't have to be knowledgeable or anything. Just say, this is important to me. What are you doing? Ask questions to the congressman.
Speaking of asking questions, in that letter, I'm a voter, and one of the questions I would ask if I were writing a very short one-paragraph letter to a congressperson is, I just want to make sure I have your home address right. Is this your correct home address? And I would put that in the letter.
Oh, Vincent. Well, the thing is, I'm accountable. Things that I'm doing on radio now, I have hundreds of people, not tens, hundreds of people now calling me for advice on things, and I have no clue. I try to do everything I can and be accessible. And to my knowledge, people like scientists normally want to do the right thing. Yeah, they're deluded like I am sometimes, but I think intent is to try to do the right thing. I think right now it's called boycotting and starting to write these protest letters. I don't know what else we can do to start changing this movie except to become proactive.
Rick,
and to what extent? Even the grade school kids sending letters to congressmen, they fall on deaf ears. It's still in their guilt field. When they don't respond to things like that, it isn't that they don't care. Yeah, everybody has a conscience, and so it can't be just easily dismissed. And while it's becoming easier with the new breed of sociopaths that we have out there, everybody still does, to some extent, care, even though they might care more about their final profit line.
Rick, let me share with you something that resulted from one of the broadcasts that you and I did. And I'm not going to say who this came from because I don't have the person's permission. But if I do get the person's permission, we'll certainly attribute credit to this person. And I am 100% positive that this person is listening right now. It says, Vincent, I heard your broadcast yesterday asking teachers to see if anyone in their schools knew about chemtrails. So I did. And you were right. No one knew what they are. I asked 4 elementary teachers, the junior high and high school science teachers, 3 other high school teachers, the janitor, the principal, and the superintendent, if they could tell me anything about chemtrails. That's spelled C-H-E-M, trails. I said that I heard of them, and I was just wondering what was in them. They mostly looked puzzled and shook their heads, but 2 of them said, Kim who? K-I-M, a person's first name.
Yeah.
Kim who? Okay.
Yeah.
Needless to say, no one knew what they were. I think I'll move to Missouri, where I can be around some of my own kind. Now, the point I'm trying to make, Rick, is we talk about chemtrails. People don't understand what they are. We talk about Fukushima. People haven't even heard of it. How is it possible that someone could live in the United States of America and not have heard of Fukushima, the worst man-made disaster since Noah's flood? How is that possible? What in the world are we doing? I even have talked to owners of a radio station who had no idea what was going on. Now, these guys, how is that possible that people don't know of this?
Well, I'll tell
They
you
don't
what
know
I've got right here. I have a website up called Geoengineering Watch, and the headline on it, for yesterday, December 3rd, excuse me. ABC completely omits climate engineering facts. And the guy is, he was, when I agreed to do an interview about geoengineering with ABC weatherman Chris Edwards, former military meteorologist, I was fully expecting a disinformation hit piece. My decision to press on with the interview was because I felt that such omission, obvious spin and cover-up would clearly expose, what's going on. I need to scroll this down a little bit. And there was a complete lack of journalistic integrity. Now, this is ABC that did the one on the possible evacuation of the West Coast. Who is determining what is and is not newsworthy has to do with what I call yellow journalism and sensationalism that sells advertising. And so you, right out of the gate, you've got intentionality, which is in a different format than, to inform and protect or whatever, the media logo is at that moment. We have lost our primary drives. I found, for example, there was a guy from...
Rick, hold that thought. Hold that thought. We're going into commercial. We'll be right back. Dr. Richard Allen Miller. I was just thinking if I were writing a resume, I would probably start with I've been fired 7 times in about a year. Rick, you're talking about yellow. Well, Rick,
that's a good keyword. Put that on your logo. Troublemaker.
Rick, you're talking about yellow journalism. Now, one of our instructors was on the air with me in an afternoon on Springfield broadcast in the Ozark Mountains.
By the way, I've been hearing some very good feedback on you doing other people, not just me.
Well, thank you, Rick. So I had this guy. I bring on, and let me just tell the class what I do. I find interesting people. I don't have a producer per se who goes out and finds talent. I do that myself, and I call people, and so I found this guy who was protesting against Walmart, and I brought him on the air, and I put him on for many hours. And he and I did a really hard-hitting, very polite, but actually factual broadcast about the inside of Walmart, how it really works. This guy is a 20-year veteran of the Walmart training camp. I started out young, and he spent 20 years there. So he met Sam Walton, he met Hillary Clinton, and he met them all down in Bentonville, Arkansas, at the corporate headquarters. Anyway, he and I worked on a protest to get a petition signed to stop the latest installation of a Walmart in Springfield, Missouri. It was called a neighborhood market. I mean, there are 5 super centers, and they wanted to put another one in there. So probably about 7 Walmarts in Springfield, Missouri. And so we got a petition signed, and I helped him with that, and we went on the air. Well, the next day, that was a Friday, he happened to be the manager of a very large chain store, farm supply, retail store. He was the manager of the store manager. He was fired the next day, and they told him because of his passion about Walmart. So they literally fired him. Okay, I was removed from the air shortly thereafter because of some of the things that I say. Now, I don't really think... I don't get it, Rick. Telling the truth is I guess is expensive if you do it. And in terms of being bruised and being beaten up, I mean, people who expose the truth are targets. And that's why you see this yellow journalism, and that's why you see these guys in ABC running for their lives, and they won't cover the real stories. They cover the sensational stories about Kim Kardashian's shoes and dress, and I mean, who wants to look at her anyway? Well, anyway, so I got fired from that radio station. Then 2 weeks ago, they threw me off the air of another radio station. I can't believe
What
it.
happened?
And well, not only I got thrown, all of us, all 200 of us USAPrepares.com instructors were thrown off the air on another station. Now, I'll talk about that at another time. But these guys, I can't believe it. I can't believe the lies, the deception at the highest levels of radio station ownership. I'm very serious about that. Either these guys have gotten calls from the government saying, you better take them off the air, or by the way, have you been audited yet?
Impose federal regulations or something.
Yeah. Either that, and either the radio station owners are a bunch of pansies, weak-kneed, pansies, or they are so greedy that they don't think that the message is worth carrying. But anyway, I wanted to share that with you. It is really difficult for our kind of broadcast to get airtime. Extremely difficult. So Genesis Communications, thank you so much for airing our broadcast. And Rick, I want to tell you, we have not received a single complaint. Not one. Not one. Nobody has complained about us to Genesis. How do I know? I asked them. Can you imagine that? So we're exposing the truth, and we're getting thrown off affiliates. They can't take the heat. They're weak-kneed. So let's start the boycott. Let's start the boycott of those companies who are not with us. If you're not with us, you're with the enemy. Rick Miller and I will be back right after the top of the hour news and commercial announcements.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Watch the greenbacks tumble.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. This is hour number 2 of USAPrepares.com. And class, when I say cocked and locked, some new listeners may not understand what I mean. I mean a couple things. One, I mean, I have with me right now in the studio a firearm that has a round in the chamber and it's cocked and locked. I also mean, are you cocked and locked? Are you prepared to defend yourself? And are you at the ready for whatever may happen? And I don't mean just with firearms. I don't mean necessarily with guns. What I mean is, are you ready to defend yourself from all of these bad things that are happening? What I'm doing, I think the highest and best use of my time is to alert our class as to things that are happening. Now, let me give you an example. On the way to the meetup on Monday night, Mrs. Finelli and I were in the vehicle, and we looked up at the sky. Farmers do that. We saw 13 chemtrails. Well, I said to Mrs. Finelli, wow, 13 chemtrails. We could count them. She counted them. I counted them. We verified there were 13. Next day, we're on the farm, feeding the cows. We look up, there's about the same number, about 13. I said, wow, it's going to be a doozy. Let's see what happens. Well, I'm looking at a map right now. It's the surface wind chill temperatures in Fahrenheit, degrees Fahrenheit, for the United States of America. Let me give you some of these numbers. This is right now. These are the extreme temperatures in the United States. Northern California, 1 degree. Idaho, -10. Montana, -42. Nevada, -46. Nebraska, -14. Does that sound cold? It's cold. And here in Missouri, it's 9 degrees. That's pretty cold. Now imagine if the antifreeze in your engine, your automobile or truck engine, is good for, let's say 10 degrees. And you live in Northern California where it's 1 degree. Your engine block will crack. So I suggest that you consider checking the antifreeze in your vehicles right now. And you can do it very easily. You can go to an auto parts store. You can even, if you have to, you can go to the Chinese factory outlet. They have a hydrometer and it has a needle. And what you do is you squeeze this bulb and it draws antifreeze from your radiator into this clear plastic housing where there's a needle that points to the temperature that the antifreeze will boil at and the temperature that the antifreeze will freeze at. It will probably cost you $3, $4, $5. I suggest that you consider checking your antifreeze right now because if, like many, you have added water during the summer as your coolant evaporated, you've diluted the antifreeze and you've increased the temperature at which your antifreeze will freeze. Rick, do you have any comments on that?
Well, yeah, it's 16 here where I am in Oregon. That's an extremely low temperature. I left the water running in all of my pipes so that they wouldn't freeze over. I remember living in the Okinawgans when we had frost lines that started at 3 feet.
Yeah, what you're saying is that in the winter you would
the
have
houses can rupture the pipes.
Yeah. Yeah, what Rick is saying is that there is the frost line is where the earth begins to freeze. And he's saying at a depth of 3 feet, it's still freezing. So
yeah, it got real cold where I was. They'd see these chuckers sitting up on a tree, 6 of them across this big balls of fur. That's the old days. It used to get down to 20 below zero and hold for a week or longer. And luckily, we didn't have wind chill like Montana or North Dakota, where you have winds that can drop it even further because of vapor pressure.
Rick, if you and I left the farm and went from our farm toward the meetup in Springfield, it's about 50 miles. If we took a different path from the one we did take, we would have gone through a little town called Rogersville, Missouri. Now, in Rogersville, Missouri, that's between where our farm is and Springfield. So it's less than 50 miles away. Rick, there was on Craigslist for sale a calf, a baby calf. And this calf had 5 legs. Now, there are...
Uh-oh.
Well, the last time I saw something like this was in Parade magazine. It was when I lived in Virginia, and there was a picture of an 8-legged horse that was born downwind from Chernobyl. And this horse had 8 legs. It was all twisted. Imagine, if you crossed your fingers. That's what this horse's legs looked like. It's all mangled and obviously could not walk and survive.
There's a backstory that I sent you in my latest diary entries regarding Chernobyl and life forms. Did you
Rick, would it be okay? Yes, I have it. Rick, would it be okay if I posted...
slime molds, and now they're finding them all over Fukushima. It is a special kind of slime mold that lives off gamma rays, and so it thrives in a radiation-rich environment like galactic central. Think in terms of terraforming. and Ghostbusters slimed again.
Well, let's talk about that in a minute. We'll go into that from this.
I'm just messing with you. Yeah,
Well, you're right on, Rick. And here's where I'm going with this. So I saw this picture of this 8-legged newborn horse, And I saw a picture, and that it was downwind from
And it could
Chernobyl.
live? It was actually able to be,
Well,
it was healthy?
Well, it was alive, but Rick, it
Yeah,
could not.
yeah.
It could not be it could not grow up because it couldn't walk. The legs were, think of crossing your fingers and then
Or like
trying
that
to use those
computer
fingers.
nerd in The Matrix at the end of the movie, where he had mutated into something else.
Well, so this horse could not, grow up to be a normal horse
Yeah.
or even walk.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so we'll fast forward from let's say over 20 years ago, probably when I saw this, and it was way after the Chernobyl incident, years after Chernobyl. Well, so this 5-legged calf was born right near our farm, let's say 40 miles away. The calf had 4 legs like a normal calf would, but out of the side of its face, think of it like growing out of its ear, was another leg. There was a
that's
hoof.
a genetic anomaly, radiation probably.
And my point,
ate a particle that fell down.
so imagine, Rick, what we're saying is you and I have been broadcasting about the
Well, the
levels,
horse didn't, by the way, the mother did, yeah.
the levels of radiation that we've been talking about that are airborne. We've been saying that Fukushima has polluted the ocean, the Pacific Ocean. We talked about how the radioactivity particles are airborne. They have
Yeah,
traveled
they're in the
across.
stratosphere right now.
They've traveled across the United States. They've ended up all over our country. And what I'm saying is, I believe that we're going to see more of this. And we have a friend, one of our instructors, a very dear friend and USAPrepares.com instructor. I'd prefer not to mention his name because his wife is not an instructor, but his wife is a doctor. And he was telling us that they are seeing chromosomal damage in newborn babies in the hospital in Missouri right now, and have been for the last, I guess it would be 8 months now. Now, that's pretty significant news. I have not heard that mentioned anywhere or seen it written anywhere. And we're saying it right here. We've got it, well, I would say secondhand. We've got it from the husband of a doctor in Missouri who is intimately involved with seeing these kinds of deformities. Chromosomal damage in newborns in Missouri at unheard of rates. And they believe that it is from Fukushima, but it has not made television, it has not made radio, except for here. And I'm linking that with this calf that was born with a hoof sticking out of the side of its face. Now, when was the last time that you saw an animal with a leg sticking out of its face? Anybody, please. Class, raise your hands. It's hard for me to see the entire class. But, Rick, I'm telling you, I don't think anybody has seen these kinds of things in normal times.
There's going to be more of this. You know, just 2 days ago, they discovered 5 million dead birds on Australian and New Zealand shores. 5 million.
Rick, let me address that the best way I know how. When we come back, I'll tell you what my observations here in Missouri are. And I guess one of the things that we do here at USAPrepares.com is we observe things and we go, something's wrong. That just is not right. It's not normal. I'll tell you what that is when we come back. Dr. Richard Allen Miller, richardallenmiller.com. And I don't think they should give me this many controls. So, Rick Miller and I are discussing the 5 million birds that were found dead off the coast of Australia. Here's my response, Rick. I live on a farm, and there are lots of animals here, and we are surrounded by life and death all the time. Literally, animals die, and it's painful to us to have to see that. And I don't like to take life. As a matter of fact, I was loading the wood stove. We heat our farmhouse with an outdoor wood furnace, and we pick up dead wood in the woods, and we haul it with the tractor to a pile, and then we burn it in our wood stove. So this is wood that, we don't cut trees down to do this. But anyway, I was loading the wood stove last night, and there was a worm. When I rolled this log, I saw this worm, so I pulled the worm out of the log and put him in the ground so that, I didn't want to just throw this worm in the fire. And that's how much we treasure life here on the farm. So I'm acutely aware of life on the farm. Rick, I don't see any bees. Hardly any. I mean, there are a few. We used to have wood-boring bees that used to be a nuisance. Now, we don't spray.
They actually, yesterday, had an extremely important technical paper come out on the use of fungicides and how it's creating the hive colony death. It was interesting. They're talking about now that there are upwards of 200 million beehives have died this last year. 200 million beehives.
Yeah, that's almost one beehive per person in America. There's like 330 million of us, so not quite.
We have
That's
just
a lot.
started to do mass execution in certain manners that we're not even aware of because of fungicides. And actually, that slime mold is a fungus. And the fact that it can live in the middle of nuclear plutonium, and thrive, would suggest a kind of life form that could become very competitive to man and is possibly, from a metaphorical point of view, terraforming Earth, much like termites or ants do on your property. How many ants do you figure are on your land? And when you think about it like that, and that man is supposed to be symbiotic, not adversarial, it requires us to rethink our relationship in the scheme of things. This is one of the reasons I've gone spiritual. It's time for us to have a different kind of a worldview. Boycotting, we're going to talk about that at some point, because that's a way that all of us can do it without any real serious active energy. To say no it doesn't require that much kind of energy just to say no. It requires discipline. And what's important, to be clear in your mind on priorities. And once you've done that, there's the answer. Change this world, you change yourself. That's the internal landscape. That's why they always said love is so good. It structures the water inside your organs, makes you healthier mentally.
Well, Rick, let's extrapolate this out, and then we'll get to the boycott. And here's where I'm going with this. And it all ties together. So the bees, we've lost a few 100 million hives, 200 million hives. Bugs, yeah, I know it's the winter, but I noticed this summer we didn't see anywhere near the bugs flying in the air that we used to. Chipmunks, I haven't seen any, not one. Now, what about the birds on the power lines that we used to see? I've hardly seen deer this hunting season. And I was talking to some of our instructors and some of our class over the last couple of weeks. And one of the things that we hear a lot of times on the farm is there's lots of shots being fired, lots of gunfire all around us. Guys and gals are sighting in their rifles, they're target practicing, and during hunting season they're shooting animals. I didn't hear anywhere near the sighting in shots of rifles before hunting season. I didn't hear anywhere near the typical amount of hunting shots being fired I haven't seen the deer. I haven't seen the opossum. I haven't seen any rabbits. No squirrels. Well, maybe 2 or 3. And where are the crows? And those darn mice that eat the wires of our equipment in the barn? I don't even see them anymore. They were a nuisance, and now I miss them. Rick, and then we'll talk about fungus when we come back. Class, Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us, and on page 1 of usapreparedness.com, I've posted a way that you can get to some of his books if you'd like to order them. Just go to usapreparedness.com, page 1, and you can click and order his books if you're interested right there, page 1. Or if you'd like to go to his website, it's Richard Allen, A-L-A-N, Miller, M-I-L-L-E-R.com. Rick, so we've talked about the bees, the bugs, the chipmunks, and even those darn mice that infuriate me because they eat through the wires of our tractors and vehicles that we have in the.
Yeah, they eat everything.
Yeah, and they seem to. I mean, they'll chew copper wire and they'll carry it from one place, in a wiring harness of a vehicle, and they'll build a nest with it. I mean, not just one piece. It's really a nuisance, and they're not there anymore. They seem to have died off. I'd like to talk about that, but let me just mention this. I'd like to say that there's an ice storm that's on our way, and it's actually starting right now. And so Thursday, Friday nights, treacherous roads, power outages, tree damage. It's an ice storm that's going to affect millions of people into Friday, and we probably will lose power in places from Texas, northern Texas, through western Kentucky. So who are we talking about? We're talking about Little Rock, Arkansas, Cape Girardeau, Missouri, Memphis, Tennessee, Evansville, Indiana, Louisville, Kentucky. If you're in those areas, you might want to prepare for being without power. It looks like it can be quite serious. And what's the tie? The tie is on Monday. I reported to the meetup group, wow, chemtrails, 13 of them. We're in for some massive weather change. Then Tuesday, I saw even more chemtrails. And I said to Mrs. Finelli, wow, this is going to be a big deal. And here it is. It's going to be a big deal. So we're looking at a pretty significant potential for an ice storm, massive temperature drops here in the Midwest and in the West. So get ready. It's coming. If you have a generator, you might want to make sure that it operates and that you have fuel for it. The big box stores in Springfield, Mrs. Finelli was there earlier this week, and she said people were buying generators at the big box store. Some of our instructors met her in Springfield, and they gave her the update as they were buying generators. So why are they doing it? Because they need them. Now, it would have been prudent to have had them before now when they were a little less expensive, but I'm so glad that people are getting them now. So, Rick, we've got this mold. It's growing in a radioactive environment. Now, mold can be airborne, right? Can't that radioactive mold be consumed and go right up the food chain?
Well, it's part of the food chain. It has its position in the scheme of things, just like man does. Everybody's got to serve somebody. Bob Dylan. I don't. Very doom and gloom, and yet, it's what it basically means is that we're in for a change in lifestyles. It's time for a change. And there's ways, like with the grid going down. I remember when our grid went down, the community got closer together in a so-called shared hardship. When it got snowed in, everybody helped each other, and that was what the Grange was about. I'm surprised that we don't start considering going back to some of the earlier ways of doing things in small communities like you find yourself. There's no reason to have it be a hardship. It could be fun, in terms of enjoyment. Of course, the disappearance of insects and the birds that eat the insects and the predators that eat the birds and the food chain, it's changing. There are ebbs and cycles, but it is absolutely different, than ever before in history. We're losing a lot of different species of different animals every day, becoming extinct.
Rick, after this broadcast, I'll be posting your diary, the diary of December 2nd. And in that diary, there is a link to a YouTube video where a farmer is speaking Japanese, and it looks like he's speaking to officials, if you will. And I use
he won't eat his own food. He's growing this food, and for export, but he won't eat it.
Yeah, and he's saying to these quote unquote officials, "You guys, I'm a farmer, and I know what's going on. You guys must know what's going on. You're being deceptive, and these practices are dangerous and deadly." And he will not eat his own grown food on his own farm.
Yeah,
in Japan.
It's going to be a change in the world and our values.
Rick,
it's inevitable. It doesn't have to be bad. It's necessary.
Well, let's mark some of my words today. I talked about a 5-legged calf in Missouri. Okay, I've mentioned that at the meetups, the need for decontamination from the radioactive dust that we may have on our dirt roads. I've mentioned that I decontaminate and I take showers and I remove my clothing and when I'm in a dusty environment on the farm, and I put them immediately in the washing machine. Now, that wash water goes into our septic system. Okay. Well, I don't know where else to put it. I really don't. And I don't think there is a better place to put it. I really don't. So the bottom line is I've mentioned decontamination. I've mentioned the anomalies with the animals. I'm saying this is not normal. A 5-legged calf with a foot or a leg growing out of the side of its face is not normal. The birth genetic defects in Springfield, Missouri, that's not normal. Now, cancer... As far as I have been able to determine, there is no way to determine exactly where a cancer came from. It's like they can't say, "Oh, there it is right there. That's it. That is what caused it." I mean, if you ask a doctor how a person got cancer, the doctor will tell you, "Well, we don't know. We don't know." But radiation causes cancer. This is, Rick, what I'm saying is I believe Fukushima is so much worse than we are led to believe. It is so much worse. We have polluted the Pacific Ocean, and my research, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my research tells me within 6 years, that'd be less than 4 years from now, a total of 6 years from the time that we had the nuclear catastrophe, the entire Pacific Ocean will be polluted. The entire Pacific Ocean will be polluted.
There are indicators. That's the correct way they do it. They call them indicators because we don't know what the true variables and vectors are when we watch sandworms changing and dying because of the plastic in the ocean, in terms of where plastic comes from, and overpackaging. 80% of the ocean's plastic came from land.
Right. Right.
And so it's affecting all kinds of levels in the ecosphere, the food chain, if you will, from the very smallest of organisms in the soil that would make the soil healthy so that plants thrive in a given soil. I have a video I'm going to try to find of a woman up in Vancouver, BC, that talks about how a forest is a community that networks and talks to each other through the mycorrhiza in the soil, the mycelium, especially the mushroom networking. The mushroom, as it turns out, is the largest single entity living on Earth. It's in the Blue Mountains of Oregon as a single entity. The second largest life form is up in Vancouver, a second mushroom. The third one is an aspen grove, in terms of how large, the organism is. When you have a forest, or grasslands, there is a networking that goes on between them that's like a living entity. And we don't even have a clue yet where our position is in the whole of things. If we're not careful, we could become another extinct species, just like it where slime molds and those kinds of life forms dominate.
Rick, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding of this nuclear catastrophe at Fukushima is that there is no precedent. There is no training. There is no manual. There are no instructions as to what to do. There's no information that says, oh, yeah. When this happens, all you have to do is. There's
right
nothing.
Now, they're saying literally that the actual physical cleanup is going to take more than 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's in the press right now.
Uh-huh. And that's the cleanup. Now, cleanup, when cleanup doesn't mean that the problem goes away. It really means that they clean it up.
That's when life can live back on that piece of ground again.
100 years. 100 years. Now,
and of course, Japan won't be here in that period. It will disappear down that trench, which means where does that radiation go? Because you can't get it if it's underwater. Listen, the whole thing is nuts, and what's needed now is more oversight and due diligence.
Rick, the research that I've done says that we need to keep these fuel rods cool. So we put water on them. And then the water leaks. So they pump the water into tanks. Now, they built these tanks out of steel. The life
they're cracking. Because of the earthquakes. They're cracked. Yeah. They're leaking. Yeah.
Right. So
it's better now. There's a plan yesterday that they want to divert it into the ocean because the ocean's already contaminated and the amount would be negligible.
What?
I got that link for you. It gets better and better each day with a house of cards. And if we're not careful, and people like you and the listeners actually personally get involved, it's not going to stop. They're crazy.
Rick,
it's a new race of humans, a sociopath that has no clue to what they think they're doing. It's yes, this plan has got a picture showing how they're going to divert it right straight into the ocean rather than contain it.
Okay.
Yep.
I haven't. Boy, I'll tell you what. I might say something that will get me arrested. I'm going to bite my tongue, and I'm going to try to compose my temper during these breaks. I'm trying. I'm really trying, but I can't do it. I can't calm down. This bothers me so much. Rick, thank you. I'll post it. Rick, 1,060 stainless steel tanks are holding radioactive waste. There's 100 million tons of radioactive wastewater in tanks that were hastily built out of steel, just regular steel. They may last 5 years. They're leaking right now. They will all leak into the ocean. Since March of 2011, when the leaks began, radioactive hydrogen, tritium, cesium 134, 137, strontium 90 are all leaking. Okay, so all right. What we need to do is arrest everyone in top management at TEPCO. They need to be arrested and tried for a crime against every living thing on the planet. They need to be arrested. And the board of directors of TEPCO need to be arrested. And what we need to do is set an example by arresting the top management and the boards of directors of corporations who commit these crimes against us and send a message that just like the Nuremberg trials, they will...
You can always go shoot them. What are you going to do about what they've done? Not what they're doing.
Well, no, I understand.
First things first.
I'm with you, Rick. I'm with you, but we need to send a message. No more. You guys want to play these games and do these dumb things. You will pay the price, just like the people that we executed from Fukushima and TEPCO. But Rick, let's do the boycott. What do we do? What do we do? What do we do about this boycott? Let's start it right here, right now.
Well, the boycott, you can post that as a protocol on how and where to start as a checklist. And you just go down the checklist, boycott this, boycott that, start here, start there. Everybody's different. Keep a diary. as to how it's going to happen. Your children and grandchildren will see.
Okay. Well, let's do this, Rick. Class, email me at usaprepares.com. Just go to the website. There's a tab that says contact. Email me the companies that you think we should boycott and why. Okay? And we'll follow up. And if we get the right responses and we verify them, we will post them and we'll say, okay, here's who we're boycotting. All right? And why. And we'll make sure it's known far and wide. So we want to know who is damaging us, who is threatening us, and why we should boycott them. Now, I'd like you to tell everybody that you know to send us the information, and we will go through it. We will read it, and we will make sure that everyone knows far and wide who we need to boycott and why. And I just went to the website or the internet, and I typed in boycott.com. Somebody already has that website. So, well, I guess we'll just use USA Prepares Exposes. We have that domain name. We'll use that. Okay. Boy.
Go for
and
it.
That was, and why do I have that? Because Rick said to me one day, Vinny, you need USA Prepares, investigates, exposes, and investigates. So we have all of them.
That's really cool.
Rick, I am furious. I can't believe it. But they want to. It's not their ocean, Rick. It belongs to all of us.
Well, it's already the Korean maps of simulation now show that it will be hitting the coast of America March 20th. And it'll start in Alaska and be all the way down into Mexico that same day. That's why the ABC did their evacuation video. But disinformation abounds, and so it's important that you all do your own homework.
Yeah, and for sure, do not eat seafood from the Pacific Ocean. Seriously. Tuna was off the list at the Finelli family when the event happened. And I said to Mrs. Finelli, that's it. No more tuna unless you want to buy it right now and get a lifetime supply. That's it. No more tuna. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's been with us. You can get to Rick's website from our website if you'd like. Page 1. He's listed as a senior instructor, bottom of page 1, usaprepares.com. And you go to his website, richardallenmiller.com. Richard, A-L-A-N, Miller.com. Rick, thanks so much for being with us.
Pleasure always.
Class, above all, honesty and integrity. What happens next is up to you.